What comes first, your family, king, religion, or tribe? For much of human history, this is what people killed and died for. It might all seem quite distant in 2026, but what if I said your country? Would you die for yours? Nationalism is a force that often compels people to self sacrifice. It convinces people to serve a higher purpose. This is true on any corner of our earth. It has played a defining role in human history for the past several centuries. But where did it come from? Since nationalism studies appeared as an academic field in the late 20th century, several theories have been put forward. Today, I thought I'd discuss the most prominent: Primordialism and Modernism. The first theory put forward to explain the origins of nationalism was primordialism. It posits that nations are ancient and fixed entities rooted in pre existing ethnic ties, such as a language, a culture, or bloodline. In other words, primordialism is an umbrella term used to describe the belief that nationality is a natural part of human beings, as natural as speech, sight, or smell, and that nations have existed from time immemorial. This is the view of nationalists themselves and was for some time the dominant paradigm among social scientists, notably the historians. If you have ever discussed history with a die-hard nationalist from any country, you probably have been exposed to a primordial account of their nation's history. If we were to take my home country of Ireland as an example, the primordial narrative goes as follows. Ireland's origins as a nation spring from our Gaelic and Celtic ancestors thousands of years ago. This era was interrupted by the yoke of England, who colonized the country for 800 years. In the early 20th century, some of the nation broke free and took their natural place as a nation of the world. Northern Ireland remains unfree. This narrative considers Ireland as an idea to be ancient and our independence as a return to normality. And yet Ireland was never one unified country at any point of our history. The only time the island was under one government, it was Britain's. Even if we focused on our pre-Norman history, the island was split among several hundred clans who fought amongst themselves. People belonged to tribes and were loyal to its chieftains. Primordialism allows for a new concept to be perceived as ancient. That is its power. Consider Patrick Pearse, leader of the Irish nationalist revolt of 1916, that was to end in his own execution. As Coakley put it, for him, the notion of national freedom was a unified, sacred, and all-embracing construct, and was marked by apostolic succession, as it passes down from generation to generation from the nation's fathers. The idea of national freedom, in this view, is not affected by the accidents of time and circumstance, and in that it does not vary within the centuries, or with the comings and goings of men or empires, as Patrick Pearse put it. This claim is unremarkable, as a summary of beliefs that were and are widely shared by nationalists everywhere. It aptly captures a core element in nationalist ideology: the idea of the nation as a primary community in time, as a primordial entity, greater than the sum of its parts, existing from an early stage in human history. Although most academics of nationalism no longer take primordialism seriously, it remains prominent in the minds of nationalists worldwide.
Pakistan. I love Pakistan. I will sacrifice my life for Pakistan. I love Pakistan.
At the other end of the spectrum, we have the modernist school of nationalism studies. The 1980s saw the emergence of this school, represented in the work of Ernest Gellner and Benedict Anderson. Both argued that nationalism, despite what primordialists think, has its origins in the 19th century. They did differ on the details. For Ernest Gellner, nationalism emerged because of the French and Industrial Revolutions, which began in the late 18th century. In his book, Nations and Nationalism, 1983, Gellner argues that industrialization led to its creation first in Europe during the 1800s. The shift from an agrarian society to an industrialized one forced the creation of an increasingly centralized state. A modern economy required a standardized education and language, which led to the invention of a shared culture, which the modern state supplied. In an era where society was localized and differences in language and culture were common, and national education required standardization. Take Italy, for example. At the time of unification in 1861, only around 2.5% of the population spoke Italian. Instead, there were regional languages and dialects across the peninsula. Most Italians only began sharing the language in the 20th century, thanks to it being the language of instruction. An important part of state building globally has been the forced homogenization of language. It allows for the development of a shared culture, with a national language and historical narrative to back it up. Industrialization put an end to past ties between peoples based on locality, religion, and feudalism. For Gellner, nationalism was almost an inevitable consequence of modernity. Benedict Anderson's work differed from Gellner's in several ways. In his 1983 book, Imagine Communities, Anderson largely agreed that nationalism was a modern phenomenon. He believed factors such as print capitalism and monolingualism were the cause. The emergence of mass-produced pamphlets and books allowed a shared identity to flourish amongst groups geographically distant. Published histories allowed for the creation of a shared historical identity and were prolific in 19th century Europe. The great historian Eric Hobsbawm would write in the 20th century, "Histories are to nationalism what poppy growers in Pakistan are to the heroin addicts. We supply the essential raw material for the market." This literature, produced increasingly in a common language, encouraged a deep horizontal comradeship amongst unconnected individuals. An imagined community. In Anderson's own words, a nation is an imagined political community, and imagined is both inherently limited and sovereign. It is imagined because the members of even the smallest nation will never know most of their fellow members, yet in the minds of each lives the image of their communion. Communities are to be distinguished not by their falsity, genuineness, but by the style in which they are imagined. Finally, the nation is imagined as a community, because regardless of the actual inequality and exploitation that may prevail in each, the nation is conceived as a deep, horizontal comradeship. Ultimately, it is this fraternity that makes it possible, over the past 2 centuries, for so many millions of people, not so much to kill, as willing to die for such limited imaginings. Interestingly, Anderson believed nationalism developed first in South America, not Europe. The late 1780s and 1790s, to be exact, via local colonial elites. The region at the time was still a colony of Spain and Portugal. This was due to specific political, administrative, and social conditions that did not exist in Europe at the time. The Modernism school has helped shape the common view of nationalism amongst academics, and not just those in nationalism studies. Anderson's book has become one of the most cited works in the social sciences. I want to take a moment to say that just because nationalism is a modern idea does not make it meaningless. It is still core to billions of people's sense of identity. And while it is common to see the dark side in nationalism, think war and racism, it has its upsides. As Anderson wrote himself, "In an age when it is so common for progressive, cosmopolitan intellectuals to insist on the near pathological character of nationalism, its roots in fear and hatred of the other, and its affinities with racism, it is useful to remind ourselves that nations inspire love, and often profoundly self-sacrificing love." Other schools in nationalism studies include ethnosymbolism and perennialism. Ethnosymbolism emphasizes the role of pre-modern myths, symbols, and traditions in shaping national identity. Perennialism goes halfway between primordialism and modernism. Nations are ancient, enduring, and deeply rooted in history, rather than being modern, but they are socially and historically centered. Largely speaking, the social constructivists have won the fight. Nationalism is something we invented inadvertently 200 years ago. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I just want to take a moment to say that all of your national identities are made up, but not mine. Aaron Gabra.